Awesome. All right, thanks everybody. Today I'm going to be talking, let's see if I can get this. Wait, it's here. There it is. Wait, how do I go back? There we go. I'm really pissed because I thought that I was being really unique and original talking about this subject. I already gave it away. So I use a very clickbaity headline. The number one growth lever, 99% of startups spend almost zero time on. I thought that was pretty cool. That works really well. And I actually believe it. But we've heard this time and again, actually, for this whole conference so far. We heard Catherine talking about the importance of net negative churn. Stelly talked about selling bigger deals. Eve talked about their experiment, how that went awry when they tried to focus on price. I'm going to be continuing the theme and talking about the importance of monetization for a business. I have a cool little GIF here. It doesn't work. It's fine. It's Chevy Chase. Pricing is not really talked about a lot, and I'm really pleased to hear that it was talked about at this conference because it's so important. What do people usually focus on when we talk about growth? Oh, there it is. There's Chevy Chase getting his money. All right, you skip that, past that. They talk about acquisition. They talk about getting new customers in the door, sales. They talk about SEO, social media, growth hacks. Everybody's really focused on acquiring new customers, and what a lot of them don't realize is that if you just keep flat the amount of new customers coming in your door, but focus on monetizing the ones you have and increasing the price of new customers over time, in addition to working on retention and lowering your churn, that monetization actually, if it increases by the exact same amount, 1%, has a 12% growth of your overall ROI. So what that means is, if you've put most of your attention on monetization and retention, then your business will grow a lot faster than people who just spend all their time focusing on getting new customers in the door and having them churn out on the other end, or being very low-value customers that don't bring a lot to the business. This was a study done by Price Intelligently. I'm going to be talking about them later. They're a company out of Boston. They're really the SaaS pricing experts, but they ran this study in this survey, and they found that this data from talking to over 500 SaaS companies. I don't think I need to prove to you the fact that monetization is important, but that won't stop me from continuing with this theme. Where we started was selling to very small customers, and I don't regret that for a second. I think when you start small and your startup's new, it's a lot easier to get $25 a month customers in the door than to try to sell larger deals. But what you'll find when you study a lot of SaaS companies is that that's where most of them start, and eventually they realize the need to move up market and sell into bigger companies. And there's a reason for that. There's a great post, and I can't even remember who wrote it or where it's at, but I'll try to find it at some point. And it talked about these three different sizes of customers. So I'm going to use bunnies. I'm sorry if you're a vegan or vegetarian and you're an animal fan. I'm using a hunting analogy. I don't hunt, so don't get mad at me for that. No animals were harmed in the making of this. But let's just roll with that analogy. So we sell to bunnies, right? Very small customers, easy little critters to get. Don't have a lot of meat on their bones, and very elusive. They escape very easily. That's a lot like your small customers, right? You know, we've heard the examples so far in this conference about those small customers, how if it's easy for them to make that decision, like what Stelly was talking about, if it's too easy for them to say yes, that means they don't really place a high value on the business, or they're too price conscious. So what we found when we started looking at the data over the last year, actually over 1 year, this is a real chart of what our different pricing plans and structures look like. So at one point we had five different plans, and this is just representing 1 month worth of data. What you'll notice is that the customer's paying only $10 a month. So that doesn't seem, that's pretty cheap, right? $10 a month, that's a Netflix subscription. They were churning, their net MRR churn was 27%. You know, we all start off going, well, if we make our product cheap, then they can't say no, and of course they're going to keep it because it's so cheap. And on the other hand, we think, well, we don't want to charge too much because if companies that pay a lot are going to churn at a much higher rate because it's so expensive. We found the exact opposite. This is the data. Churn on customers that were paying $62, which is still not a lot of money, negative 2% churn. Companies paying $119 a month were at 0.6% churn. So we found there was completely inverse relationship from size of plan to churn. So this is important because if you can extract enough revenue from customers, what it means is that their lifetime value is higher. If their churn is low, then automatically their lifetime value is much higher because they're sticking around and they're keeping their plan. If they're paying you a lot over the course of their lifetime, that means that you can actually spend more on acquisition. You can pay more on Facebook ads and getting salespeople to talk to them because they're bringing more than that in their lifetime, right? If you have a higher ARPA, it means you're going to have lower churn, which means that you're going to have negative churn if you can upsell existing customers more of them than leave. That's pretty good. We want exponential growth. So the natural tendency then is to say, okay, so what you're saying is sell into enterprise, sell into big companies. We sometimes hear this advice from, advisors in the startup world of saying, just go enterprise, right? We got this advice ourselves in our early days. Now, there's a problem with selling into enterprise, and it's much like trying to bring down an elephant. So if we're saying selling to bunnies, like capturing bunnies are too small, not a lot of meat, elephants have tons of meat, but it will take a whole team to bring them down, and it might take you a year, right? Much like an enterprise sale. If you're trying to close $1 million contract, Stelly was talking about all those different people you need to talk to, procurement and legal and IT and all the different contract negotiations. That's going to take you a long time. And that's not a bad thing if that's your product, that's your market. But there's a better way that we had found, and that is selling to deers. Because deers are big enough that it's worth it, it's worth your time, but they're also not as hard to bring down as an elephant. So we started getting into selling to the mid-market. So again, we're not talking massive plans. We're not talking $10 a month. We're not talking 20. We're also not talking six-figure, seven-figure contracts, right in the sweet spot. That's where we started to put our effort in changing our branding, our messaging, and our focus. Now, so you might say, okay, well, I get the need that I need to move up market or I need to sell higher price plans. How do I go about it? Do I just slap a bigger price on my plans? That is how we used to run pricing tests. We were those chimps just throwing shit at the computer and just saying, well, are people buying now? I would say that's probably, has anybody ever done this? If you run a product company, have you just said, let's just try this price, see what people say? Who's done that? Few people here. Really, I didn't know of a better way to do it than that, to just try pricing and see how it goes. But then I found out about Price Intelligently, and they are the SaaS pricing experts. So we began an engagement with them where they were using surveys to go into the market and try to figure out in a way that is data-driven, that's not taking into account any biases, what the market's willing to pay for our product, how it should be structured. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily that everybody here who runs a startup goes out and hires Price Intelligently because they're pretty expensive and your company may not be at the point where you can afford a Price Intelligently. But what I've done is I've taken their methodology, stolen it from them, and I'm giving it to you guys so you can try it out. So actually what they did was they didn't invent this. They used two very well-known things. They didn't make them up when it comes to surveying. So the problem is if you ask people what they're willing to pay, like if somebody says, Kyle, what would you like to pay for a Tesla? I'd say, I don't know, I'd like to pay like $5,000. That'd be pretty cool. But is that going to help them grow their business? No, because if you ask people what they want to pay, everybody wants something for free, right? So there's a way to ask people what they'll pay in a way that gives you statistical data that you can use and you can work with. So the one thing that they do, one of two things, is relative preference analysis. So what that does is it's a way to figure out what people value the most, what resonates the most with the market. And then the second thing is price sensitivity. So again, instead of just saying, how much do you want to pay, there's a way to ask people a question so that you're able to get a good range of prices to figure out what's not too much so that they're not going to actually buy it, but what's not too little so they question the value. There's a whole lot of psychology around that. So again, this is relative preference. So for example, if we're trying to figure out what feature is really going to drive growth and what's going to drive upgrades, instead of just asking customers what they like, they follow this model where when they survey them, they say what's least important and what's most important. And by forcing them to make a choice, then you start to get really nice graphs and charts that show you where the market's head is at. And what do they consider just a core feature? Like what are they not willing to pay for, but they value, but they're not willing to pay more for it? And then what are some other things that they're actually willing to upgrade and pay more for? And then the second thing was price sensitivity. So again, instead of just asking the price, it's asking what's too expensive to consider purchasing, what's getting expensive, what's a bargain, and what's so expensive that you would question the value and then the quality. And the great thing is now you can slice down all your different market segments, all the different, maybe it's different industries, maybe it's different sizes of customers, and you can put an actual tangible value on what do they expect from your product and what is the price they're willing to pay. That's maybe not too low, but it's also not leaving money on the table. So if you guys are running an early stage startup and you want to start trying to figure out what you should price your product by, I'd recommend taking this approach. There's a lot of platforms and tools out there that let you send surveys to targeted people. You can start running these types of surveys, getting some really good data on what your market's willing to pay, and it's a lot better than just copying what your competitor's doing. So I hope that that helped you guys. Now, what we were able to learn, and we're still in the learning process, we're not done this, but what we were able to figure out was who our real buyer personas were, what segments of the market. Sometimes who you think your market isn't always the case. We were able to find some really surprising industries that placed a high value on the product that we weren't even targeting in our marketing. And the second thing was our pricing structure. You know, we tend to sometimes price by what we think is good in the moment. Sometimes it's per seat. Other times it's how much data a customer consumes. Like, what's your actual value metric? How do you create value for your customers? And as their usage increases, they're willing to pay more for it. We were able to figure that out. Finally, what feature packaging is there? So, you know, is there a certain feature that's only on your high tier plan that really should be considered a core feature or vice versa? We were able to figure that out as well as the exact price point. Give it a try. I hope you guys like it. And that's all for me. Thanks.